I am Ray, and if you have trouble with overthinking, it's probably ruining your life, so it's time to stop it. You see, in life, we have priorities, things that we value. Here we are. And this exists kind of like in a triangle. You like triangles? And the thing that we value the most leads our life. And, well, the quality of the things that we value determines the quality of our life, because that is where our attention is going. So, if thoughts are a real big deal for you, if you give a lot of meaning to your thoughts, they're going to pull you all over the place. And, well, as it's said, the mind is a great servant, but a terrible master. And this is why you see most people live, not that good of a life. Because they allow their thoughts to lead them. They allow themselves to be influenced by their thoughts. Not good. It's not. Because most of our thoughts are just noise. We give our thoughts a meaning, and depending on the meaning we give those thoughts, well, it determines our experience of reality. You see, I give my thoughts almost no value at all. Most often I would tell people, don't believe a single negative thought your mind tells you, because it's lies. It's not real, not true. But I take it a step further and say, well, all my thoughts are irrelevant. I don't care. Forget about it. Not useful to me. Because the moment I begin entertaining some thoughts, the thoughts begin to grow and grow and grow and grow until they're just, big. You don't want big thoughts unless you're into that kind of thing. I find that it's mostly a distraction. If you want to know how I live my life, well, I'll show you. I would say 99% of my time is spent in surrender. Just in the present moment, not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, not worrying about problems. And what this allows me to do, it allows me to be in flow all the time. But the opposite of flow is resistance, which the mind creates through its judgments and analysis and thoughts. So, when you're in resistance to life, you suffer. And life can only be experienced in the present moment. And the present moment is a flow state. So, we got a few things going on here. Life can only be experienced in the present moment and through the mind. Somehow, however this works, the mind takes us out of the present moment into the past, into the future, into judging our current experiences. It gets us trapped in this eternal mind space. And when we're separated from the present moment, we are separated from life. And where life is not, death is. Like when you turn the lights to a room off. Darkness is what remains. Are you afraid of the dark? There. I'm here. And you see, life is the source of all joy, peace, love, and abundance. You like abundance? So the more you're connected to life, the more you experience these things. And the more you're disconnected from life, the more you're separated from these things. And, well, what's the opposite of this? Suffering. Problems. In religious circles, they say, or at least what they mean, when they talk about heaven and hell, because a lot of the times, people have no idea what they're talking about. What is this heaven and what is this hell? This doesn't make any sense. What's going on? Well, heaven and life are just the same thing. I use life as another word for God, because it is the same thing. It just is. And, well, mathematically speaking, if you just say, okay, what's the opposite of this stuff? It's going to be death, a little bit of death, a little bit of hell. What's the opposite of God? Not God? Yeah, it's just suffering. And this is why, for instance, you see some people, they look like the living dead because their body is alive. It's moving. It's doing its thing. But there's nobody really home because they're so disconnected from life that they're just, zombies. They have been cut off from their soul. They have been cut off from life. Just an empty shell. And here's the thing. You can measure how connected or disconnected you are to life based on how much you suffer. The more you suffer, the more you're disconnected from life. And the less you suffer, the more connected you are. This is just mathematics here, people. Person. Another way you can tell is how many problems do you experience? How often does life not go the way you want it to go? Because if life is continuously not going the way you want, or the way you expect it to go, well, then it means that you are living in a false understanding of the nature of reality. Because if you understood reality clearly, life would kind of go the way you think it would go. Of course, we can't predict everything, but you know that if you're constantly fighting an uphill battle just to make ends meet, just to kind of get by, you're struggling, you're surviving, that's not life. That's a hell realm, which most people are living in. Because think about it. How many people right now are struggling? Struggling? What is this struggle? For most people, it's so normal to struggle that they just assume that's the way that life is. But I'm saying, well, no, that's the way you are because you've been disconnected from life, because of your stupid thoughts, because you believe your thoughts are true, because you allow your thoughts to pull you all over the place and to lead your life straight into the ground. And practically speaking, thoughts are electrical impulses in the brain. The brain uses like 30% of the calories that we consume. So this is all energy. And energy is the same thing as life. One and the same. So when you're constantly thinking, you're constantly being drained of your life force, your energy. So you're going to be exhausted. You're going to be depressed. You might even be a little bit anxious. You're going to feel like death. You're going to have no motivation. You're going to have no desire to do anything. You're going to be lethargic because you're being consumed by death energy. We must understand that we are just kind of these vessels for these higher energies. For instance, if you're a normal and I told you, hey, you gotta stay in bed for the next 7 days and you can't get out even for a moment, even to poop. Well, okay, there's some exceptions. But regardless, you would say, yeah, probably not. You'd last like a few hours and then you'd get annoyed because the life within you would force you to do something and it would be frustrated because, well, you can't do anything. It is the life force driving you to do things, to have desires, to be motivated, to live. But if you were depressed and miserable, and I said, hey, you got to stay in bed for the next 7 days, you would probably be like, oh, well, I'm already there. No problem. Because you are consumed by the death force, so you have no motivation or no desire to live. So it's not a problem. Same thing with, more practically speaking, going to bed every night. If you are too energized before bedtime, too much life, you're not going to fall asleep. Because sleep is a mini death. In order to fall asleep, you need to be relaxed. Death is surrender. So too, if you lack sleep and you're really tired, it doesn't matter how hard you try to fight to stay awake. Eventually, the death force is just going to consume you and you're going to fall asleep because there's no life driving you to do things. And so this happens at a micro level and a macro level in positive, natural ways like sleep and waking up, and not so natural problems like being depressed for a long time, like never catching a break, like always experiencing problems. So you have to ask yourself, well, life happens in expansion and contraction phases. So are you in a natural contraction phase? Or is there something more serious going on? Because sometimes we will feel naturally less energized, less motivated, less desire. And if we allow nature to take its course, that will pass and we'll rise back up. But the question is, to what degree are your thoughts ruining your life, controlling you, influencing you? And one of the greatest... Hold on. The Transformers are back. One of the greatest cures for like everything, most of our problems, is simply reconnecting to life. Because life is also the source of harmony. And where there is harmony, there is no problems. But when there is a disconnection from harmony, lots of problems. I mean, we're talking about fundamentals here. And you see, it's all rooted in the same one issue. Can you guess what it is? Close. Try again. The mind. Now here's the thing. The mind is not the bad guy. The mind is just a tool, and it just happens to come with some unfortunate consequences. A necessary evil, which makes it neutral, okay? It's neutral. So the mind creates the sensation of separation, the experience of separation, which is what allows you to look at me and say, that is a separate human being. Like me. I'm a human being, that's another human being, and we're separate. Two human beings. And it's also directly related to identity. A sense of me. And from this, thoughts arise. So all of your thoughts throughout the day will always be related to your identity. And this is how we experience reality. We experience reality in the mind. And so whatever information we have in the mind, that is what we experience. And when we go throughout our day, we look at things, we judge, label them almost automatically, and that is how we experience things. For instance, you look at me, peeker. Are you peeking at me? You have this idea of who I am. So when you look at me, you are actually experiencing an idea of who you think I am, an image, and projecting that image onto me. So everybody who watches these videos is going to have a slightly different way of perceiving who I am. And yet none of it is true, because it's just an idea. So too, when we look at everything, you look at a tree and you label, oh, that's a tree. You don't actually experience the tree unless you don't judge it and label it. And we're doing this to people all the time. We have these ideas of who people are, and because people, generally speaking, maintain the same general personality, we can assume that, oh, okay, I know this person, I know that thing, but it's just an assumption. Most of our reality is assumed. The point is that we're experiencing reality not as it is, but as we are. We experience reality almost like a series of thoughts that are all directly related to this identity. And here's the thing. Here's the issue. The more attached you are to your mind stuff, to your identity, to your thoughts, meaning the more you believe them as true, the more separated you will be from life. The stronger sense of separation you will experience. And you gotta understand, there's a reason that the people who wrote the Bible made a point to put these ideas of what I'm talking about now in one of the first stories in Genesis, the fall of man, Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden. In the beginning, we were at one with God. Therefore, we were in paradise. Because God is love, joy, peace, abundance. And when you are one with that, it's paradise, heaven. But what happened? They ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, of the knowledge of good and evil. What is good and evil? It's separation, duality, from oneness to two-ness. So it was a fall from one to two. And what it is, what the story means, it's a symbolic representation of our evolution as a human species. And it will be the same for all other animals that are able to evolve like we have. Meaning, in the beginning, our brains were not powerful enough to create a sense of separation. Like the lizards and the birds and the fish. They're all just one with nature. They have no strong sense of self. They still have animalistic instincts and self-preservation, but it's not strong enough. Whereas you get some animals begin recognizing themselves in the mirror. And that is the first sign of an increased intelligence, a higher mind. And so what happened? Over time, human beings grew stronger and stronger brains, able to produce stronger and stronger brainwave frequencies. And the faster those brainwave frequencies vibrate, the stronger the sense of separation. All that brainwave frequencies are electrical impulses in the brain. Bzzz. Thoughts, you could say, too, are electrical impulses. No, it's not necessarily that simple, but you get the idea. The mind is created through electricity and the rate of vibration of that electricity. And here's what happens. Especially if you're intelligent. All intelligent people are going to struggle with overthinking because their brain is powerful enough to produce a lot of thoughts. And because this is the case, our brains become conditioned to think all the time. One last point about Adam and Eve. What was the first thing that happened to them after they ate the fruit? They realized they were naked. For the first time, they recognized a sense of separate self, that which did not exist before. And then, what happened after that? They were banished from paradise, cursed to live in pain and suffering, to toil the land and struggle their whole lives. And guess what? Human beings have been struggling their whole lives since the beginning of time. And they are still struggling all the time. Still under this curse of original sin. And that original sin is ignorance. Funny enough, the fruit was supposed to make them more intelligent. It just made them more ignorant. And now, because we have a strong sense of separate self, we become hyper aware of our mortality, of our vulnerability. And so now we begin thinking about the future. You see someone get eaten by a jaguar, and you begin thinking, I don't want that to happen to me. So you become anxious and worried. Oh, what if I get eaten? And you start trying to predict future possible outcomes and prepare for the future. Store up your nuts for the winter. You like nuts? Of course you do. And, well, the natural consequence of that is to reflect on the past mistakes so that we can avoid that suffering again in the future. And also judge our current experiences as, okay, if life isn't going the way I want it to, what needs to change? What do I need to do? What are the step-by-step plans? Or you just wallow in suffering and say, oh, this is hopeless, this sucks. And now you see the root of our problems. All of our thoughts, all overthinking, all negative thoughts, it comes down to one thing. Me. All of your thoughts are about you. And you see, all the religions, and I mean all of them, no matter how primitive and how stupid they seem, they point you back to the original truth that there is no separation. And that the mind is an illusion. It's a construct made up of memory and sense data. And that our sense of individuality is misplaced. That we have falsely assumed our identity into existence. And that is why we suffer. We're living in an illusion and separated from the truth. And so the point of religion is to lead you back to the original truth that, well, we all won. And what happens is that once you directly see that you are not this person you believed yourself to be, you cut off the source of thoughts, and they begin to die over time. It's like a chicken with its head cut off. It's still going to wiggle around for some time, until eventually it just plops. And so this is what you're seeing with me. For instance, my head was cut off, a few years ago. Now I'm just wiggling, until eventually one day, great spiritual person. You become more and more empty, empty, till there's nothing left but the truth. And you go from this state of separation created by the mind and return back to unity with God, with the truth, with your true nature. And so, it's the whole point. The religions teach you how to return back to unity with God. Anything that deviates from that is a distraction and a waste of time. Anything that reinforces your sense of separation is actively keeping you from God, no matter how religious you seem. That's why I always say, arguing about religion is stupid. Go and pray, leave it alone. And you see, the thing is, I could give you some techniques about how to stop your thoughts. Go meditate, perhaps. But the point is that you're always going to struggle with it until you get to the root of the problem, which is identity. Until you cut off the head of that snake, is always going to be producing more and more thoughts, no matter what you do in life. You'll always be on this hamster wheel of trying to get better things and to avoid bad things. But in this ever-changing world, you're not going to find lasting satisfaction. But you can find lasting satisfaction in the eternal. And that which separates you from the eternal is your own belief in separation, in identity, in thoughts. And the thing is, too, so long as you identify with your mind, you will not be able to understand unity. You will say, well, we're friends, and those are our foes. Tribal mentality. That's created by the ego, by the mind. So some people there's unity, and others, nope, no good. And well, you must understand, this is why Jesus said, "That of which you do to the least of thee, you do to me." When you judge that homeless person, when you judge even that evil person who does bad things, and you think and fantasize about killing them and beating them up, you are reinforcing your sense of separation, which is keeping you stuck in ignorance, when in truth, we are all part of the same one thing. Christ is in the homeless person, same in the evil person, same in all beings like the dogs and the birds and the fish, because Christ is life, which is why he could resurrect himself. Because what power does death have in the presence of the life? None. What power does darkness have in the presence of light? None. And what is darkness? Darkness is ignorance. So the more we're living in ignorance, the more we're separated from the light. And the light is also God. I mean, it's all God, but you won't understand that so long as you're stuck in separation. And this mind is what people call the matrix. That is what it is. The matrix is a construct that is an illusion that we believe to be the true nature of reality. And most people who have ever lived have been trapped in there. So because we assume that everybody's in the same boat, well, we think it's the truth. And it's not. And this causes an existential crisis in some people. So you better be ready. Because, well, at some point in life, no matter what, you're going to have to wrestle with the idea that everything you've believed to be true was not true. That's called a midlife crisis or a dark night of the soul. And so as long as we remain trapped in identity, in mind, we are setting ourselves up for a bad day and a bad week and a bad month and a bad year. Because one day, life's going to come along and wash away our illusions. The light of truth will come and destroy the darkness. And to the degree in which we are attached to our ignorance will determine how much suffering that causes us. I like to say hell is the truth when you've been living a lie. And that is also why they talked about hell being fire. Because when you're trapped in the darkness and the light comes, it will be a burning sensation, a disillusion into nothingness. Now I got some bad news. The mind itself is like a living thing, and it doesn't want to die. It doesn't want it to dissolve into nothingness. So what it's going to do? It's going to keep you trapped. It's an active force fighting against you, fighting against your liberation, fighting against your freedom. And well, you got to ask yourself, how much Stockholm Syndrome do you got? Meaning, how much do you fight and argue for the one thing keeping you stuck? Because it will manipulate you and deceive you into continuously feeding this your energy. It's what I call the monster mind. The monster mind is like a force of resistance, keeping identity alive. Because it's like a parasite that feeds off your life force, your energy. And the moment you begin paying attention is the moment you threaten its existence. And so it's going to take some persistence. This is why most people never become free. Because unless you have a strong desire for freedom, the gravity of the world will continuously pull you back into it, and you will stay stuck in the illusion. Now, everybody becomes free eventually. So don't worry. I just want to make you aware of the game that's going on. The monster mind is like the lord of illusion, which keeps you stuck like a battery to the matrix, stealing your life juices like a human juice box. And guess what? It does this through your thoughts. And this is why it's so important to not allow your thoughts to direct your life. Because if you allow your thoughts to influence you in any kind of meaningful way, and you open up your influence to the monster mind, and the monster mind is a master at manipulation and deceiving. It will get you to believe that it was your idea to entertain whatever it is, whatever negative story, whatever negative belief. And while you're sitting there miserable, in a downward spiral, sabotaging everything, the monster mind is just having a buffet, tasty. All because we allowed the thoughts in. We allowed ourselves to entertain fear and worry and concern about anything. And as you go along this journey, it becomes more and more tricky. Because there are some things that you are going to say, well, I can't just not think about it. I can't. I have to think about it. Like you see some people talk about, all the tragedy going on in Palestine. Don't you care about Palestine? And well, it's the definition of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because worrying about it and thinking about it does nothing to actually do anything about the actual situation. All it does is it messes with your own psyche. It brings you down to negative states of being, which is actually the cause of those kinds of tragedy situations. Did I say that right? Meaning, the reason that these bad things happen is because we allow negative states of consciousness to proliferate on the earth. Because the monster mind can manipulate you while you're in a negative state. That is when you're most vulnerable. And people think they're being good by worrying about things they have no control over. Because the monster mind manipulates them using their heart and their good nature, so-called, their empathy. That's how tricky it is. Because you would assume, oh, well, I'm being a good person. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Not realizing that something else is pulling your strings, causing you to focus on this stuff. Now, if you're called to do something about it, in the present moment, that's a different story. But as far as I can tell, especially on social media, people just ruminate about stuff they have no control over. Tell that to all these suffering people, why don't you? I get that all the time in comments. You see, one of the toughest parts on this journey is dealing with the golden chains of morality. Because if you identify as a good person, especially if you're a religious person, if this is who you are, or who you're trying to be, you're going to be fueling thoughts all day. You're going to be judging bad people, and you're going to be judging yourself. And every time you do anything that betrays your identity, you're going to feel shame, you're going to feel guilt, you're going to feel fear and worry about the consequences. You're going to ruminate on how bad of a person you are. Oh, I got to do better next time, I got to do better. You get caught in the psychological drama that drives you crazy. And well, it doesn't matter if your chains are golden or iron, they're still chains. So eventually, you'll have to rise above good and evil, which is not an easy thing to do for people. Because people really want to be good. They want to stay away from evil. But attachment to good or evil is going to cause suffering because it keeps you stuck in separation, duality, and continues to reinforce this identity that from the very beginning was an illusion, keeps us stuck in ignorance. And think about how difficult that is. To say that both the darkness and the light are equally important to the truth, that you cannot get rid of evil without also getting rid of good, and to be non-attached to evil or good so you can be free, so you can actually return to unity with God. But in order to do that, you gotta lose yourself. That which you were never, but you thought you were, and return to what you really are. And this is kind of, the spiritual journey game, that you're on this journey, trying to return to God, trying to connect to the divine, while at the same time you have this opposing force of the mind, the monster mind, keeping you stuck in separation, keeping you trapped, separated in illusion. And just when you think you've broken free, another layer. A more subtle, more trickier layer to uncover. And as you keep winning these games, these levels, let's say, eventually you just win, and then the true game of life begins. That which is not centered in identity, but that which is centered in everlasting freedom. And the reward for beating that game is permanent peace and relief from suffering. And slowly but surely, or not so slowly sometimes, a continued deepening into truth with God, a deepening connection to life, and you will see that the default state of everything is peace, love, joy, and abundance. And the mind creates these layers on top that create the illusion of separation. And so we begin removing the layers, removing the illusions, until we get back to the default state. And we begin to see reality as it is, clearly, without corrupting the data through our identity, through our thoughts. Because so long as you're attached to any ideas, you are corrupting the information you are receiving. Not a good scientist. Meaning you don't know what is true because reality is being filtered through your thoughts, through your identities, through your beliefs, through your stories, and it's shaping the experience that you have. So you're never getting an accurate representation of reality. You're always getting this biased, subjective understanding. And then, well, you'll probably go and try and teach others and perpetuate ignorance in the world. Think about it this way. We're all connected to Source God through this like little umbilical cord. And the mind is the portal between the inner world and the outer world. But the mind is also like a resistance valve that either opens up this tube or closes it off. This is also life, the source of life and creation. So the more attached we are to our mind stuff, the more constricted our life energy becomes. And the more we surrender the mind, the more we open up the floodgates. That's all. And so what I've shown you so far is that, okay, well, it's the identity that is producing the mind stuff. So it doesn't do you any good to try and just mess around with the mind stuff. You gotta attack the thing at the root. Now, you could either get rid of the identity altogether or just make it more positive. Because if you've been traumatized, if you have a lot of conditioning, like most people do, it's going to perpetually produce thoughts, often negative ones. It's going to cause you to hyper-focus on negativity. It's going to ruin your life. So you got two choices. You either change who you are, make it more positive, or you cut the snake off at its head, meaning you cut the identity away altogether through self-realization, awakening to your true nature, enlightenment, awakening. And you'll see that as you surrender the mind, you just let go. You let God. This little stick person begins to disappear. And God and life begins effortlessly flowing through you as an empty vessel. And now you see why enlightened saints like Jesus or Yogananda or Ramakrishna, how they perform miracles, how they are not bound by the limitations of space and time, not even death. Because when you become one with God, you also become God, and you have infinite power and control over reality, and you become a master of the universe. Congratulations. I am Ray. If you feel like your negative thoughts are ruining your life, and you just can't escape the mind prison, check out Mantra Mind Mastery, link is below. Much peace and many blessings, and remember, just be